15 million merits.
What?
15 million merits.
Yeah!
15 million merits is the second episode of season 1 of Black Mirror. It originally aired all the way back in December of 2011. This episode tells the story of Bingham Madsen and Abby Khan, two people who managed to find each other in a bleak and unyielding world. Bing sees an opportunity to save Abby from a life of miserable drudgery, but the chance is stolen from them when the reality of their world caves in, crushing everything. Sound depressing enough? Good. Welcome to another Black Mirror analysis. In this episode, we are going to take a dive into the world of 15 million merits and these two characters as we attempt to decipher the themes and overall messages found in this story. But first, a little bit of trivia. Although this is the second episode to air in the series, it's actually the first episode ever written for the show. And it was written in part by Charlie Brooker's wife, whose name I can't remember right now. So before we get started, a few things. I need to warn any newcomers to the channel that there are spoilers over the horizon. I'll be talking about the story and characters, revealing details about events along the way. If you haven't watched this episode yet, head over to Netflix where you can binge the entire Black Mirror series, then come back and watch this video. Well, don't watch the whole series first, just watch 15 million merits. I'd like to take a moment to welcome the newest patrons to the channel: Claire C., The Intern, and Moxie McMurder. Contribution to my work is much appreciated and I am forever grateful. Check for your names in the closing credits. If you'd also like to support the channel, check out the Patreon. Link is in the description. Nautilus Files now has a Discord channel, so if you want to join the rest of the innies and talk about Severance, Black Mirror, or the like, or you just want to hang out with the Tinfoil Gang, you're welcome to join us. Now that we've got that squared out of the way, what is that? Now that we've got that squared away, it's time to dive. The environment the characters are placed in 15 million merits is such a big part of the story that I think it's crucial that we establish some of the important aspects of it first. The story opens with Bing waking up in a room that appears to be made of screens, and we witness a cartoon rooster alarm clock that he waves away to shut off. This is a world of inescapable screens. They're everywhere you look. In this case, it gives the room a feeling more akin to a jail cell than accommodations. As far as we can tell, there is nothing else in the room besides the bed and a few square feet of floor space. A perfect way to introduce the idea of the omnipresent screen and the pervasive way in which they show up in every aspect of the story. Besides those screens, there is the idea that everything Bing does is monitored, not out of concern for his safety or well-being, but to exploit him. The cameras watch his every movement, waiting for prompts like pushing out some toothpaste or unlocking a door. The message here is that everything is digital. Everything that is real has been replaced by a digital counterpart, and everything is watching you. That should feel familiar. Ads are displayed on these screens because of course they are. We watch as Bing brushes his teeth as part of his morning routine, but he can't even do that without being bombarded by ads. The added salt in the wound, you can't skip the ads without incurring a fee. Even just muting ads will cost you. Oh, and don't think you can close your eyes and just not watch it. The system knows you're not watching, and you get punished for it with the stroll alarm, and the video is paused, waiting for you to resume viewing. Bing gets on an elevator with some of the most miserable looking people. They're not too enthused and it shows. Also note that they're all wearing the same drab gray jumpsuits as uniforms. There is no individuality here. Next, we finally get a glimpse of the world outside of Bing's room, and it's, well, bicycle, bicycle. Bicycle. Okay, maybe not bicycles, but they are cycles, and there's a whole lot of them. The battery of stationary bikes lining both sides of the room makes it quickly apparent that riding the bikes is the job itself, and they're rigged to generate power from being ridden. Bing, like everyone else on the floor, wakes up every day to ride bikes, to turn the crank over and over for the sake of the system. This, of course, is all meant to be metaphor for work in the modern world. It wasn't until my third viewing of this episode that I truly began to appreciate the genius in this simplistic approach to making a point when you consider it as such. If we distill things down to their most fundamental, modern work is a lot like riding that bike, and that most jobs exist for the sole purpose of keeping the economic system running, but not because what we do in those jobs is actually necessary. Because we need something to do. This work of riding the cycles probably doesn't amount to much in terms of energy produced, but it keeps the workers busy. And don't worry, you can always stay entertained and numb to it all by consuming some streaming channels, also provided by the system. For your time, you are compensated with virtual cash, which you can then use to buy virtual things. This is how you give back. Today, very few of us work in what would be considered essential jobs, necessary for the furtherance of human existence. Jobs like agriculture, energy production, distribution, medicine, or education, for example. Most of us, myself included, work in jobs that were created to benefit the wallets of a very small group of people. And because of this, there is a detachment between what we do and who we are. It's the detachment that Brooker is trying to put on display here, making it as plain and as easy to digest as possible. You might might say it's a bit clunky, but the point is well made in the end. Brooker makes the added effort to include many of the other facets of modern economy that complicate things, sometimes in the form of subtle hints, and at other times as obvious as signposts along the side of the road. One such example is the commentary on competition in class. This is evident in the form of the leaderboard that we see in the background, displaying who is working the hardest. Much like in the real world, the cyclers are pitted against each other to compete for resources as a motivating factor. They are compensated for their time and merits, which acts as the only means to make improvements in their lives, however minor those improvements might be. In 15 million merits, the people who work the hardest and can produce the most are the most valued, and the people who can't produce for whatever reason are not. This is another parallel to our society and how we view work and value. And it brings us to the topic of the lemons. The custodial workers we see picking up behind the cyclers throughout the day while wearing what looks like lemon yellow hospital scrubs. These people get treated like dirt by some of the other cyclers. But why? Well, Brooker takes some time to explain. The first time Bing enters the cycling room, we see this guy. Dude's struggling. He's trying his best to keep up. He's gassed, and it looks like he's about to fall off the bike. It's safe to assume that he's got to be producing less than the others because of this, even though he's trying his best. The next time Bing enters the cycle room, the camera notes the seat is empty. He's gone. We get an update from Sleazebag. I don't even want to remember this guy's name. Anyway, who tells us that he's been demoted, sent down to another floor, and he adds that he is lazy. We then see this character again, but this time he's wearing the lemon uniform because he's been relegated to picking up trash and being verbally abused. The idea here is that people who are overweight have a harder time riding the bikes and producing energy. This makes them less desirable to the system because it cannot extract as much value from them. These people are labeled losers, a commonly used term to imply that a person doesn't have the material successes in life that they are expected to have. The verbal abuse is only the tip of the iceberg though. We see more examples of how these people are treated like trash, and it's sanctioned by the system. There's the streaming reality TV show where they humiliate people by force feeding them and spraying them with what looks like milk from hoses. The other is a first-person shooter where the objective of the game is to murder the custodians. The game and the show are meant to vilify and marginalize them for not being good cogs to the machine. Thus, they are portrayed as useless people in society, objects of ridicule. This kind of propaganda functions as a form of reinforcement, keeping the society stratified and the classes in constant conflict with one another, because it benefits the system when the workers are pressuring each other to do more work out of fear of looking lazy. The people slaving away on the bikes feel superior to the people slaving away picking up the garbage. That appeal to the ego is the glue that maintains the shape of this society. A lot of this blew right over my head the first time I watched it, but in retrospect, I can see why these details were added in. The one thing I found most disturbing though is that this system found a way to commodify the hatred for the people who can't produce by portraying them in these videos as pure entertainment. Okay, now that we've set the table, let's talk about the story of Bing and Abby. Bing spots Abby, the new girl in town, on the elevator, and cue the Amelie French accordion music. We immediately get the hint. Bing and Madsen is in love. One thing to note in this scene is that Abby is smiling and almost seems happy, a stark contrast to everyone else on the elevator we've seen so far. We might attribute her positive demeanor to her being new to the workforce, and she perhaps just hasn't gone sour yet, but this is part of what makes her stand out. Bing, on the other hand, comes off as a bit dead inside. He's doing the job he was assigned, going through the motions, but is completely detached from what he's experiencing. Bing sees no connection between his work and his identity, and that makes his work meaningless to him. All that exists for cyclers is work and the distractions from work. But maybe that's about to change for our dear boy. Bing is taking a whiz when he hears someone singing in one of the stalls, a female voice that he finds captivating. This is a rare occurrence, an expression of something real and unrelated to any part of the doldrums that are his everyday life. Unsurprisingly to us, this voice turns out to be Abby's. Bing awkwardly tries to talk to Abby, complimenting her singing ability, only to be interrupted by a Wraith Babes ad. Perfect timing. These ads aren't random, by the way. I didn't catch that at first, but the ads pop up based on what the system thinks the user is thinking, trying to steer your behavior towards more consumption at every opportunity. So Bing essentially got exposed by a pop-up ad, making it embarrassingly clear to Abby that he's into her. Lucky for him, the feeling is mutual. So what does Bing want, and how does he try to get it? Well, Bing wants to feel something real and make his work meaningful. So he chooses to put the result of his work, his riches, to use by helping out his new crush. During an exchange at the vending machine, Bing tells Abby that she should enter a contest that works pretty much like those fill in your country idol reality TV shows that were popular about 10 years ago. I never got into them, but the premise is simple. Impress some judges and your life changes forever. Bing believes Abby can win, but the cost is very prohibitive. 15 million merits to be exact, up from 12. If chosen, Abby would no longer have to ride the cycles day in and day out. She could be free. She could pick her own clothes and do things like get to wear jewelry and see the outside world from a large window, as one of the ads suggests. The point is, life would be better than it would be for most, or so it would seem. While trying to talk Abby into taking the ticket, she asks him why not spend the merits on himself. He responds by telling her that there's nothing he could spend the merits on that would add any value to his life. Anything he could buy would be useless and meaningless to him, buying things for the sake of buying them. We get a sliver of this character's mindset, and it's clear that Bing sees past the BS that his life has become, and it recognizes exactly what's missing. It's missing something real. So Bing buys the ticket for Abby, which she accepts, and the two set off on their adventure to see the wizard. It's when these two protags decide to make their way to the idol contest that the ever-encroaching darkness of this world becomes ever more apparent. After registering, Bing and Abby are corralled into a room full of cyclers desperate to be famous. The room is chaos, with people singing over each other and practicing their performances, hoping to get selected for a shot in front of the judges. One of the staff gets a call to bring in Abby, because she's pretty. Before going out on stage, she's made to drink something called compliance, a play on the words cuppa and compliance, a drink that seems to dull the mind of the contestant, making them more susceptible to persuasion. Another blatantly concrete example of the aim of the powerful. Abby shyly steps out onto the stage and greets the judges, whose condescension is almost unbearable. We have the Simon Cowell stand-in, we have Julia Davis, who plays a character called Charity, and this sleaze calls himself Wraith. Still under the influence of compliance, Abby belts out an impressive performance, swaying the entire crowd and impressing the panel with her heartfelt rendition. By the way, this is the same song that Beth from White Christmas sings at the karaoke bar, or in another video. You want with all of your heart for things to go well for her, and for Bing. But Black Mirror doesn't care what you want. Get Brooker. I could literally feel old Charlie Brooker staring at the back of my head, grinning and rubbing his hands together while watching this scene. Because as beautiful as the moment is, you already know you're about to get brookered. The judges tell Abby she's a good singer, but she ain't good enough. The resident scumbag Wraith suggests that Abby would be a star if she accepts an opportunity to be an adult actress. Abby is the deer caught in headlights. Stunned by the development and not sure on how to respond, pressure is on. It seems as though she wants to decline. That life is not for her, but the judges apply pressure. They promise her she'll be happy because she'll be numbed by medication, that she's potentially passing up a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that she's going to spend the rest of her life regretting, and she'll have to cycle for the rest of her days if she does not accept the deal. Abby wants to say no, but she can't between the pressure of the spotlight, the audience, the people chanting to say yes, and her own desire to escape the prison that is her life's. Pretty dark moment here when you think about how the world conspired to take Abby and do with her what it wanted despite her intentions. She shared her talent with the world, and all she got back in return was objectification, reduced to something to be used and sold. Bing, rightfully incensed by what he's witnessed, makes up his mind to get an opportunity to give the judges panel and the entire audience a piece of his mind. He's on a mission for that get back. He concocts a plan to spend the next few months saving up all of his merits to buy another ticket, and when he finally does get that chance, he holds the panel hostage by threatening to hurt himself, giving him the chance to give the audience the dressing down of a lifetime. I would love to play this, but Mr. Copyright says no. Suffice it to say, it's quite the monologue, one of the better monologues I've heard in a while. It's unforgettable. Bing says everything that the story means to say, and what is the closest thing to exposition you'll ever get in a Black Mirror episode. But he does it with all the rage and venom that could only come from someone who has reached their limit. So what was the response? The panelists sit quietly, and then after taking all of this in, the judges offer Bing a deal. As if nothing Bing said penetrated their hearts, or maybe they don't have hearts, but none of it mattered to them. The deal, like Abby, Bing can escape his life as a cycler. All he needs to do is turn his rant into another show for the streaming service. Turn outrage into cash. I like this scene because it kind of speaks to how the system we live in works. It looks to turn everything and anything it can into money. And so even after hearing this heartfelt plea, this pure unadulterated screed, they still went back to default and thought, how can we turn this into money? I mean, I was certain he'd say no, probably get tackled and carted off to some prison for punishment and we'd never see him again, but at least he didn't go out like a punk. But That's not what happened. Bing gave in and accepted the offer. Say it ain't so, Bingham. The interesting thing about this scene is that, unlike Abby, Bing did not take the compliance. It's not exactly the smoothest word off the tongue. He was in full control of his mental faculties. That is until the pressure came on. The audience cheering, the judges pressing him, and the choice he had to make of serving them or going back to his dreary existence. The writer is telling us that compliance wasn't necessary for the persuasion to be successful. It's a simple fact that desperation and social pressure are powerful enough to convert even the most principled individuals. The final scene could have almost been a bonus scene, because they honestly could have left things with him at the stage, and us not knowing whether he accepted the deal or not. It would have been fine to leave it there. Bing is delivering one of his stage rants in a stream that's now available for the rest of the cyclers to watch ad nauseum. Bing is living his new life, the one he earned with what some might call selling out. The face makes the heel turn, and now we watch him carefully lay the shard of glass back in its designated place. Alongside it, we get a shot of the penguin statue, a callback to Abby. So what about the penguin? A flightless bird that just so happens to live in a cold, barren world. I'm sure the metaphor was not lost on anyone there. But when we first see it, it's an origami paper sculpture that was created out of the imagination of a young woman who was trying to make an honest expression. The penguin is a lot like the song Abby sang that caught Bing's attention in the restroom, but it's in physical form. We see the penguin on the wall inside Abby's room when Bing sends her the ticket, and we also see it when she's cycling and the lemon tosses it in the bin, calling it detritus, indicating that the world sees no value in this. Therefore, it should be thrown away. I read this as a symbol of truth, honest expression, specifically Abby as a vessel of this expression. It represents what was missing from Bing's life and what he wanted the most. Given that he's made his decision to take the money and play the game, it's interesting that he still keeps that large, ornate wooden version of the penguin with the gold foiled beak, I might add. Its place at the end of the scene reminds Bing of what he lost and will probably never find again. Especially now. He's probably drinking petri dish orange juice right here as he looks out at what appears to be the real world, the outside, but you can hardly tell behind those massive glass slabs that line the wall of his new cell. I want to run things back a bit to this character, Swift. He's called Swift, at least that's what the credits say. So when Swift sees Bing having trouble with the vending machine, she jumps at the opportunity to talk to him because she's crushing on him. Bing is completely oblivious to her advances. He takes the apple and says thanks, and this scene was cold as ice. But it also made me laugh, but I also felt bad for her because she seems like a nice person. Anyway, Bing continues to ignore Swift through the rest of the story, but I still think this character is important. And the reason why I say this is because of how she responds to both Bing and Abby's time under the spotlight. Her character is like Bing in some ways. She sees the utter emptiness of it all, and when the rest of the audience is cheering for Abby to become an adult performer to change her life, she hopes that Abby says no. Also notice how Judge Hope gets a bit teary-eyed at this moment. My guess is that because she is also a woman, she relates to Abby's situation. Maybe she was put in that very spot herself in the past. She knows what's in store for Abby, and it may be creating some conflicting feelings for her. I think this is also what Swift is experiencing too, when we can see that she's clearly disappointed in the choices that both of these people make. I'd like to think that if Swift was given the opportunity, she would turn it down. That's all for this analysis. If you've made it this far, you are the real MVP. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you already know what to do. Thanks again to my patrons for your support and to the rest of the Tinfoil gang. Until we meet again, stay safe out there, and off you go.